40 years ago, Live Aid brought the world together. The concert provided relief for victims of famine in Ethiopia. But Live Aid might not have happened without the journalism of the CBC's Brian Stewart. Stewart tells that story and others in his memoir, On the Ground, My Life as a Foreign Correspondent. And joining us from Toronto is Brian Stewart. Wonderful to see you.
Nice to be here. Enjoy it.
When you first reported on the famine in Ethiopia in late 1984, how quickly did you realize that your reporting had this enormous impact around the world?
Well, when we finally got the first report, which arrived in Canada November 1st, 1984, I was exhausted. We were all totally exhausted because we'd been in the field for 3 or 4 days. And I got a call from Peter Mansbridge, the anchor then, who said, "You have no idea what impact this is going to have. We have people weeping in the studio here. This is going to follow you for the rest of your life." And we began to hear, we were in Ethiopia for many, many, many weeks, out of touch with the outside world a lot of times. But we began to hear about this extraordinary reaction sweeping across Canada, and the partnership between the government then of Brian Mulroney and the Canadian people were raising money. But not only that, Canada had taken on a kind of leadership role to get the whole world behind saving northern Ethiopia, where the epicenter of the famine. Canada took a lead at the United Nations. Canada lobbied other governments to get involved. Canadian Foreign Minister Joe Clark arrived in Addis Ababa, the first to do so. So it just began to snowball from that point on. We were so busy covering the famine that we couldn't pay too much attention to what was going on in the outside world. So it wasn't for some considerable time afterwards that I got a look at the full impact of that. Mm-hmm. Those two broadcasts, like CBC and the BBC one.
And when you look at the snowball effect, it led to Band-Aid, Do They Know It's Christmas? It led to charity songs in Canada and in the U.S. And of course, the next summer, there was Live Aid. And there was a moment where David Bowie was on stage and he introduced this video that you and your colleagues had put together. Tell us about the impact at that moment of that video.
Well, at that point, Geldof was complaining a lot that they weren't getting enough money pouring into this biggest charity concert of all time. They played this video that had been put together by CBC editor Colin Dean, which ended on the face of Burhan Waldou. Well, I get to later, but these children, the starving children, the mothers, the misery of it. It only ran about 2 minutes, I think, but it just melted the phone lines. People were crying in the stadium. Geldof says the phones melted, the money started to pour in such an avalanche. And it went on and spread, having this enormous impact that no other single thing did have, which made Live Aid the biggest, most successful charity concert in the history of the world. Nothing quite like it's seen before. And I doubt we'll ever see it quite as like again. Mm-hmm. They've sometimes summed up that, but if you use it to today's dollars, the combined concert raised something like $600 million in volunteer donations. I mean, that's an almost incredible figure.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And just seeing a few seconds of that video again, it's still so incredibly moving. And you mentioned the girl that you met in Ethiopia. She was close to death when you saw her, but she survived, and you've maintained a relationship with her?
Well, she was 3.5. She was dying, declared to be dying by a nurse when we raced her to a nurse, and she'd be dead within 15 minutes. We went away. We were all shaken. We came back to film her funeral later that day. Her burial, and she was alive. They stuck a needle in her. She survived. And years later, I said, I'm still struck by that image because it symbolized Ethiopia. If she could survive, this girl, then Ethiopia could survive. So I went back with my producer, Tony Berman, and the CBC crew, and we actually found her. It was off in the hinterlands. And, I did a documentary on her then, and then I arranged her schooling from then on and supported the family. And through her, I've got involved in a lot of works in northern Ethiopia over the years, education and the rest of it, mainly trying to bring relief to these poor children who have absolutely nothing unless they get sort of education and a life going forward. So that's kept me in touch with Ethiopia. It's been one of my my fondest connections in life.
When I look at the era in which you worked, I really see it as the golden age of TV news. And as you know, things have changed quite a bit since then. There have been major cutbacks at all sorts of broadcast companies. I wonder if something like a famine to that extent happens somewhere in the world today, would we know about it?
Well, there's a fair chance we wouldn't, actually, because networks have cut back their overseas coverage so much, cut back on reporters, and also there's more restrictions on travel even than there was in our day. And we had to break our way into northern Ethiopia to expose it. But today it's getting so hard, and also with all the other cycles of news, with this vortex we live in, endless 24/7 conflicts and wars and the rest of it, it may just be, fragmented. We might get a fragmented report out about it. In 1984, we had the satellites were still fairly new. Video made things seem really, almost immediate compared to film, and that gave us the space to have that impact. And without television at that time, I don't think the impact would have been there at all, frankly. News reports in print would not have made an impact.
You also covered the fall of the Berlin Wall a few years later. It was such a hopeful time as we saw communism dwindle away, and it turns out maybe it wasn't that hopeful. Are you a bit disappointed with the way things are now?
Well, because I had been behind the Iron Curtain many times during the Cold War, I really realized that that freedom had come and lives were improving behind the Iron Curtain. So I'm not entirely disappointed. I mean, the hundreds of millions of people since have had a much freer, better life than after communism fell. Very disappointed on the effect of the world outside that sphere, though. I mean, the Cold War, for all its awfulness and evil, had a kind of solidifying effect on the world. There wasn't going to be wars breaking out all over because these giant superpowers would put a lid on and keep the numbers down. Once the lid, the controlling aspect of this Cold War was gone, the world became more fragmented, more torn apart by insurrections and various wars and proxy wars here and there. So in many ways, it's been a very disappointing aftermath. In that regard, particularly, we can just look around the world today and say, how much better are we off than we were in 1989? And I'm not so sure in many areas we are better off at all. Of course, in some areas we are.
Yeah. So having covered the world for Canada, how proud are you to be Canadian?
Enormously proud. I'm incredibly proud to have lived through that period in the 1980s, by the way, when Canada really was known as a Samaritan state. It was helping out so much around the world. It had a great international posture. Canada was a very, very proud country. I think we have that in ourselves to be that height again. I think that we still have the values that we should be very firm in supporting and be proud of. So, but I do wish we have to get our eyes and ears back in the world more. We have to have more foreign coverage. We have to have better diplomacy. We have to really know more about what's going on in the world than we kind of do at the moment.
I have to ask you, you were good friends with Conrad Black in high school, a rather controversial figure. Do you still consider him a friend or a friend who happens to be a scoundrel?
No, he's my oldest friend, and I'm proud to have him. Conrad Black has had a very tumultuous career at times, but hugely successful at times. And, in other parts he's had his downfalls. But he's always been a very strong, loyal person and very faithful to friends. And there's a sort of elegance to his thought and writing that's very important. We have maintained friends because I've refused, and he's agreed, that we would not discuss Trump ever. So we have a kind of demilitarized zone across our friendship that the T word could never be raised. And we don't. We talk about almost every other subject except what's happening in the White House in the United States these days.
So obviously, as a foreign correspondent, you've been to all these hotspots around the world. You've been to many major capital cities around the world. I'm wondering, is there just one place that you haven't been to that you would still like to visit?
Gosh, I've never been to Australia. And now I think I'm too old to go. I mean, to face that air flight, no way. So that's one scratch off. That would be the one that I missed somewhere along the way. I'm just very curious about, but the flights now are just too far for me. So I now limit my basket, what do you call it, gift basket or wish baskets, to about 5 hours of flying, and that's it. You have to be inside that sphere, or I'm not going to be seeing you.
Well, fair enough. Within 5 hours, you can get to Calgary, so you can still pay us a visit here, too.
That's great. I love that.
All right. Brian, thank you very much for speaking with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And Brian Stewart's new book is On the Ground, My Life as a Foreign Correspondent.